two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
This is the...
Welcome. This is the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 29th of July, 2019. Our last episode for 2019. We were looking at usage, and usage on iHeart was up. Usage on Stitcher was up. Also, Spreaker. We need to double down on YouTube and some of the other channels out there. There are many there. And we are now at Google Podcasts, for those that did not know, and use Google Podcasts. One more there. We're also on Spotify and various others. We'll be doing a little more to advance those causes as we move along here, and also the RIS feed. Hopefully you can use it to find the episodes. Nonetheless, this is the Monday Morning Quarterback, where we quarterback events that have recently happened, targeting the Sunday talk shows sometimes, but we do have some of the news that was on the talk shows. They were out of Baltimore. People were talking about the latest attacks from DJ Trump on Elijah Cummings. He represents the city of Baltimore. And Baltimore, we think of Camden Yards, a beautiful ballpark in the center of downtown Baltimore. So there are things there, and also they have Morgan State University in Baltimore. They have world-class medical centers in Baltimore also. And there's an emerging high-tech sector in Baltimore. There are no doubt some shortcomings. The progressive candidate Bernie Sanders was talking about, and that was the west side of Baltimore, looked like a third world country. Well, in many cities across the U.S., the 50 continuous states, due to very imbalanced economic development, where virtually about 20% of the population is getting most of the benefits. And that is enlargement from the 2% that own most of what is worth owning in America. But once again, we have these situations out there, and in economic development, where you go to New York, you can go to Queens, you can go to the Bronx, you can go to Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, they're developing it. You can go to Vegas, Memphis, Tennessee, Denver, Colorado. There are certain segments of the city that lag behind, and they have always lagged behind from the days of what was called urban renewal, which was African removal. And much of these cities, as Baltimore, have stagnated. They really have not advanced since urban renewal. Chicago is a very good example. Some of the old housing projects, Cabrini Green comes to light, were removed, and up-to-date developments were developed and, of course, built. But the people that once occupied those dwellings are no longer in the city. They have moved on. So you'll have that populations have been removed, such as in Chicago. Parts of the south and west side are underdeveloped. And there's a lot of underdevelopment, but when you start to look at development, and you hear the administration talk about jobs, yes, you can have jobs, and the Chicago political activist minister, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, says, yes, African people had jobs in slavery. They had full employment, no doubt about that. But they did not have any development, and that is the key. There is development. And what is the engine for development? It's the federal government. So DJ needs to do his job and develop Baltimore. There's a misconception that cities can develop themselves and even enter into the so-called public-private partnerships. They have their limits, such as Camden Yards. Camden Yards is a development area, no doubt about it. It benefits some people, but not most of the residents of the city of Baltimore. That's a very good example there. There must be a federal development program that encompasses all 50 states and communities, whether they be rural, whether they be urban, or whatever. And that has to be put out there, a sort of Marshall-type plan to take care of these situations. Broadband in rural communities need to be taken care of. Healthcare in rural communities that have fallen forward behind need to be taken care of. As in Baltimore, incidentally, Baltimore has a world-class medical center, Johns Hopkins. So there are things in Baltimore, and not very far from Baltimore, Annapolis, Maryland, the Naval Academy. So you start talking about these cities, they have their advantages, but you have to have a master plan. And in recent years, under the neoliberals and under the right-wingers, they have moved more to block grants, giving cities the opportunity to do their own development and not do a unified development. And the cities, of course, don't have the resources. They can develop one specific neighborhood that they decide to build in, but other neighborhoods get very, very little building in them and virtually no development. You can build a shopping center, you can build a store, or what have you. That will employ a few people, but you're not developing the community. That's why in the software game we talk about sustainable development, and that is what the federal government has to be about. And they have to look at energy sources, solar, wind, and various other things, electrification of cars, training. They have world-class universities in Baltimore. In fact, Amy Klobuchar's husband teaches at the University, I believe, of Baltimore Law School. So he's commuting, and just as Elijah Cummings does daily. We'll have to ask her about that. If you see her, ask her about it. But to the rat-infested place of Baltimore, not that she lives in Baltimore, but the whole point is this. It's, if I recall, it's about an hour's drive from D.C., not very far at all. I'm not certain what it is by a rail. They have a super rail on in that corridor. You can get a train from D.C. to Boston. We've done that, and on to New York. So they do have developed transportation in those areas, and that's some of what you look at with your master plan. What unfortunately has happened in this country is too much emphasis has been on the stock market, not enough emphasis on the financial sector and the banks, etc., and shadow banking out there, and not emphasis on development of people, sustainable development of people. And this is the takeaway you take out of all this fight. Don't get into the situation where he's calling Elijah Cummings names, talking about Elijah Cummings doesn't visit his own district. And this is an unfortunate situation. He does on a daily basis. Wakes in Baltimore, heads up to D.C. This is what Joe Biden used to do. He'd wake up in Delaware and head to D.C. He rode the train on a daily basis. So you can talk to Vice President Biden about commuting. There are a lot of people that commute. But when we hear these diatribes on Twitter, check out the validity. Now, the situation is you place DJ Trump on the O.T. Leo's 3 strikes. If DJ missed the facts on one tweet, he's missed the facts on the second tweet. And if he does on 3, he's out. He strikes out. The ball is out. He's out of the game, period. That's the end of him right there. So the way you address that is when the information comes out. Some of his cronies were looking at a special that was done on Fox News. Well, you'll hear these specials done on Fox News. They'll have videos of trash in the streets. Well, if you go to the right areas of D.C., you're going to find trash in the streets there. So DJ needs to clean up his own backyard before he starts talking. You go to New York, you're going to find trash in the streets. And in other cities where they have had problems with garbage, with a removal of the garbage, and not only removal of the garbage off the streets, in New York they have where to put the garbage. Some of the garbage is being returned to them, I believe, from the Philippines, that has been out there for 2 or 3 years. So there's a whole bigger problem about how to dispose of waste. You have to deal with the entire problem. You just can't deal with 2 or 3 streets in West Baltimore, how many streets it is, and the third world conditions. That is the responsibility of the national government, and to a certain extent the state of Maryland. But there's been nothing but a neglect. There's no doubt about that, and the issues are now out there. What we want to hear is how you're going to solve the problem, get the trash picked up, get the people that live in that area developed properly in a sustainable manner. It can be done. In Detroit, they proved some of this, but unfortunately, getting a grocery store in Detroit, they got one there, but the people have not got sustainable development. And that needs to be the emphasis when the whole country moves to sustainable development. The only thing they have developed sustainably in an oddball thing is the military. Well, the military doesn't have any renewal. When we worked at Jobs with Peace, it's a one-way street. Yes, the military employs people. Yes, they contribute to various military contractors, but there are very few people involved in that circle that manufacture the weapon systems, etc. Less every day. There are a few quote-unquote soldiers on the arms these days, and used to be in the support systems there, do not pay very well. So this whole idea of these mech duty wars are in itself a waste of time. And when you deal with these, the wall, those things as a waste of time. So you're putting billions of dollars in things you don't need to build in. The wall is not a sustainable project. It's just a damn wall. So you need to people need to start talking about how to sustain things and how to deal with immigrants, comprehensive immigration bill. That's what DJ Trump should be talking about, not building a wall. He has a law enforcement program going, and that extends out there to such things as the immigrants, an immigrant going to a third country like Guatemala and supposedly apply for asylum there. Well, Guatemala doesn't have the economic, political, or social wherewithal to take anyone in. People are fleeing that country. So that's just another facade that's put up there to fool people. And we were looking at the Garlic Festival here, we'll get to it in a minute, out in Gilmore, California. And people were killed there. People were wounded. Well, this is behind this whole right-wing scheme of be safe. In the U.S., no one is safe. But why does the right-wingers push this be safe situation? It is apparent. They are pushing a law and order program. Hitler pushed the same thing, be safe. Well, no one was safe. He caused a war, and Germany was laid to ruin on the be safe law and order program. So that's what DJ Trump is appealing to, the most primitive instincts of these people, that they're somehow going to be safe. They're not going to be safe. It's just that some neighborhoods tend to be safer than others. But still, there are concerts where these people went. This is supposedly a family-friendly concert, and people end up dying there. Same thing that happened in Vegas, people listening to a concert. It happened in New York, a smaller scale there. Just several thousand people involved in that situation. But this whole idea of being safe, anyone tells you to be safe, just tell them stop lying to you. Be very clear with them, and that will take away that particular situation. Let's go to Gilmore, California here, the Garlic Festival. And this is the Mercury, San Jose Mercury. 4 dead now, including suspect at least 15, after shooting at the Garlic Festival in Gilmore. Garlic Festival here. If you can believe, a person could end up literally dying at a Garlic Festival. But that is possible, and it did in fact happen. Let me see if what we can get here from it. news is always very hard to get in the early hours of these events as to, they do know the shooter is dead. Did the shooter have any accomplices? That we don't know at this point in time. So we'll stay tuned on that as news updates come in at the time we're doing right now. Gilmore, these 4 people are dead, including the suspect. 15 were injured after someone with a gun cut through a security fence and opened fire on the crowd. That was Sunday evening near the end of the Gilmore Garlic Festival. Later Sunday night, police were still searching for a potential accomplice. And the shooter was killed less than a minute. So in other words, they responded very, very quickly to the festival ground at Christmas Hill Park near Miller Avenue there, and it was the third and final day of the famous garlic concert. Among the dead was Stephen Romero. He was 6 years old, from San Jose, whose mother and grandmother were also shot and being treated at Valley Medical Center. It was sort of a nightmare you hope to never be in, Smithy said. The shooting began as the festival was winding down. The band was playing their last number. Sean Vigi was working near the stage when he heard loud pops and saw bullets and hit the ground. I called out, "It's a real gun. Let's get out of here," Vigi said, who hid onto the stage with the other members of the crew for several minutes. Natalie Martinez, a longtime Gilmore resident, had gone to get food and was separated from her 2 daughters when the shots began. I ran to find the girls. They were running also, and I thought we open prey. It was often, according to Smithy, the suspects appeared to have crossed a creek that bordered a parking lot, cutting a fence to enter the concert. When the gunman with an assault-style rifle began shooting at the crowd, engaged the suspect police officers less than a minute, and they killed him. We have one suspect we know is dead, and some witnesses reported. And this is eyewitness reports are not that reliable. There may be a second suspect out there. And Smithy didn't give the details there. Said the police will remain at the festival ground throughout the night to search for a possible accomplice who would be gone. I expressed my extreme shock and sadness about happened today. Gilmore's Mayor Roland Velasquez said at a press conference, "I would ask the thoughts of the community as our police continue to look for a suspect." Tony Parabachek was walking past the vineyard stage where the crowd had gathered, some resting on hay bales to watch the last performance, and he said he saw a man in green walk towards the crowd. I thought some idiot was setting off fireworks, and we saw him. Another witness who only gave his first name. The crowd began to scatter, he said, and he dropped to the ground, which was fine, making his way to a refrigerated truck where about 20 people were sheltered. 2 women had been shot, also were hiding in the trailer. Spokesman for the Santa Clara Valley Medical Center said 6 gunshot victims arrived there, and at Lucy Hospital, that's in Gilmore, 2 were transferred there, and some were actually taken to the Stanford Medical Center, as I understand from other reports. But Mendoza was eating at a picnic table with the family. This was a very family-acted event. There were a lot of kids. The shooter was next to the kids' play area. So this shows what can happen. People were running so fast to escape that they were tripping and stumbling, no doubt about that. Again, that's from Natalie Martinez. People were evacuated to the Gilmore High School and a nearby college also there. And witnesses and people united with their family can call 408-846-0583. Again, 408-846-0583. The Gilmore Unified School District will provide counseling services to its student staff. Any community member that would want it. The shooting occurred at the 41st anniversary of the event, one of the nation's most famous food festivals, wrapping up 3 days there, drawing food lovers from around the country. The festival serves as Gilmore's top fundraiser for the year, with volunteers staffing the event. Since 1979, the festival has raised more than $11.7 million for local nonprofits and schools. 4,000 plus volunteers work so hard every year to see this event in this way. Is just one of the more tragic and sad things I've ever seen. That's Brian Bowie, the festival's executive director. We feel so upset for those that were impacted, friends, family, and neighbors. It's such a horrible experience, no doubt about that. And the primary reason you're having horrible experiences is of the environment whipped up by this administration. The National Rifle Association. What you have is an interesting situation. You have the promotion of guns, although gun sales are down by the NRA. The quote-unquote right to protect oneself. Now, I don't know how many people there had gun carry permits, but that was not the issue. The shooter was put down in 1 minute once they discovered him, but because of the assault rifle he could literally get off 15 rounds in less than a minute. That is one of the problems out there, and those have to be addressed. You'll never have, quote-unquote, a safe environment as long as you have millions of weapons floating around. And the type of hyena ideological standpoint you have now. You have libertarian types out there that they are for willy-nilly. You have other right-wingers out there, and you have these people that pop up, such as the one we're at Charlottesville, Virginia. So those are the situations we see ourselves. This is Boston Red, incidentally, in the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast booth. Let's move on from this. This is a very tragic situation. And to Flushing, New York, a teenager won the $1 million prize. His name is Giffordorf, I suppose. $3 million on Kyle Giffordorf, American teenager. After the top prize at a tournament in New York, popular online game is called Fortnite. He's 16. He's from Pennsylvania. He was one of at least 100 players competing for $30 million in prize money. This is a video and online game that I'd never heard of. Playing under the name Baha. Let's see here. Giffordorf won the solo final portion of the Fortnite World Cup by scoring 59 points, 26 more than his nearest competitor Palm, according to the Fortnite World Cup leaderboard. Words I can't explain it. I'm just so happy, he said in an interview at the evening at the Arthur Ashe Stadium, as in Queens in New York. It is posted also on Twitter. Launched in 2017 is probably why we haven't heard it. Fortnite's popularity has helped Epic Games reach $15 billion. Valuation last year, it competes with other games from Electronic Arts. And etc. Here, global revenue from esports, and this is why we're covering on the Monday Morning Quarterback. And professional video game competitions hit $1.1 billion in 2019, up 27% from last year. According to, and thanks to ballooning revenue from advertisers, sponsors, media rights, according to reports, and overall global video and electronic games market, excluding revenues from esports, would generate $152.1 billion in 2019, up 9.6% over last year. That's according to Newzoo. They are an analyst. You have an analyst on every corner out there, and I think we put this on our Twitter feed. Let me just quickly go here to cyber currency. Here, I think we can get this. The headline is from Belarus, used to be part of the Soviet Union, to Bahrain, cyber currency. And the president, Alexander Luchekov, met with an entrepreneur in 2017, and their discussion is scheduled to last for an hour, but it went on 3 times as long. According to Prokopinstia, it ended with Lushnikov asking him to propose regulations to boost the country's tech sector. He worked at IT firms, lawyers draft guidelines to cash in on the emerging digital industry, cryptocurrencies. 2 years later, the rules are in place. Investors can trade Bitcoin in an exchange operated by that person. The idea was to create everything from scratch, he told Reuters in London. Contacted for comments, Luchenkov's office directed Reuters to an account of the meeting here on the president's website. Major financial centers like London and New York, which apply traditional financial service rules to the sector, may be attracted to big institutions seeking safety, but compliance, complexity, and costs precludes many startups at the heart of the fledgling industry. Conversely, lightly regulated jurisdictions like Belize would allow for easier market access, like Belarus and other new entries, including Bahrain. Malta is in there. Gibraltar are seeking to offer a third way, crafting Pacific rules for the cyber country's currency sector, betting that they will attract companies by providing regulatory security as long as tax breaks. Well, there's no guaranteed success. Cryptocurrencies represent a rare chance for these states or territories to grab a slice of the global pie, so to speak. And I'll finish this up. This is from Reuters. Another risk of building rules for unpredictable and rapidly evolving industries as they could soon become outdated. No doubt about that. ZPX, that is a Singapore-based crypto firm, will launch cryptocurrency trading platform QUME next month to that's QUME, to cater to institutional investors, etc. And it's decided to base the business in Bahrain's capital of Manama. I hope I'm pronouncing that one right. And anyway, the cryptocurrencies are moving right along. ZTE estimates such costs would come to around $200,000 a year in Bahrain versus $750,000 a year in London. So advantage to setting up in some of these places. Belarus demands audits of issues of digital coins and details of the project underpinning of any issuances. So a little bit more transparency. In the U.S., by contrast, digital coin transactions are taxable. In Britain, capital gain taxes apply. iExchange said it would initially look at other countries, including Estonia and Malta, but chose Belarus because of its proximity to the market target. So again, that is it. Ireland has still the Irish-based research and market reckons the sector will grow to 1.4 billion by 2024 from 1 billion this year. Crypto regulations vary in the world, no doubt about that. But Facebook is thinking of getting into that act also. So, in other words, this is why we had it up here today. So many people will be into it. Insignia, this is on sporting cars in Cyprus, beaches in Dubai. Procheknir is followed by 5.6 million people, I suppose, on Twitter. Any knowledge of risk came from blockchain technology, including potential for money laundering. So we hear the word blockchain, block up there. Let's do the numbers here. The baseball scores from last night. We tuned into the Sox and Yankees game. Very interesting game there. Nonetheless, Phillies 9-4 over Atlanta. The Rays 10-9 high-scoring game there in Toronto over the Blue Jays, and the Mets beat the Pirates 8-7. The Marlins 5-1 over the D-backs. The Reds 3-2 over the Rockies. It was all Nationals in D.C. Former Fed Chair Racky is happy. Anyway, 11-4 there. The Cubs 11-4 with the Brewers in Milwaukee. The Twins 11-1 over the White Sox on the south side of Chicago. The Royals 9-6 over Cleveland. And the Astros beat the Cardinals in St. Louis 6-2. And in Camden Yard, the rat-infested city of Baltimore, as old DJ said, the Angels beat the Orioles 5-4. The Athletics 6-5 over the Rangers. The Giants 7-6 over the Padres. And in 10, the Mariners beat the Tigers 3-2 in Seattle. And this was the Yankees game, and one we tuned into. It ended 9-6. Yankees over the Sox. The Yankees had 8 hits and 2 errors, and the Sox had 10 hits and 3 errors. A lot of errors in that game, so we'll all remember it. Let me just very quickly do the run to Baltimore, I think. Yes, where we're going next here. And we'll and this is the Baltimore Sun here. Trump calls the Cummings racist in a new round of tweets out there. Called Representative Elijah Cummings racist Sunday afternoon. Tweets as Republican president contains his attack incident. This is in the Baltimore Sun on the 28th. Colin Campbell is the writer. Make sure we acknowledge who wrote it. In a tweet he wrote, if Cummings would focus more energy on helping the good people of his district, Baltimore itself, perhaps project could be made in fixing it. He called Cummings a racist in his tweet without offering any explanation. And old DJ Trump said that the racist Elijah Cummings would focus more of his energy in helping the good people of Baltimore. He could fix the mess that has helped to create. That he's over incompetent leadership. His radical oversight is a joke. The tweet came amidst a flurry of posts. Also dragged Nancy Pelosi in. Well, she'd have to be in. Someone please explain to Nancy Pelosi, who was recently called a racist by her own party, that there is nothing wrong with bringing out the obvious fact that Elijah Cummings has done a poor job. And anyway, the Democrats will play the race card. This is more of his nuttery here, when in fact has done very little in our nation's great African American people. Trump's now an expert on African American people. Post followed a Sunday comment in which he called Baltimore rat infested. We talked about that. Elijah Cummings is a 68 years old son of a sharecropper who has been vocal against Trump around midnight. He tweeted, "So sad that Elijah Cummings has been able to do so little for Baltimore." This is basically a repeat. Elijah Cummings, the president, Mr. President, I go into my district daily. Every morning I wake up and go fight for my neighbors. My constitutional duty is to conduct oversight over the executive branch, but it is my moral duty to fight for my constituents. And he took aim at Nancy Pelosi. Has someone seen what is happening in San Francisco? It's not recognizable lately. Something must be done before it's too late. Democrats should stop wasting time on witch hunts, he calls them. Elijah Cummings has had his chance to address crime and conditions. Again, this is back to the safety scheme here. Get it done when he just used his oversight committee anyway. Cummings has also drawn the president's ire for investigating touching his family members, and that is Ivanka Trump, and Jared Kushner. They've been on investigation before. The district is 55% African American, including a large portion of Baltimore. It's home to the national headquarters NACP, Johns Hopkins University, and Johns Hopkins Hospital. This really has struggled with violent crime. More than 300 homicides. 4 years in a row it has criminal instructor, a police department under oversight, and they should be under that. District extends into Maryland, Baltimore, and Howard counties. So this was also reported to the Associated Press. And let me see, I think we have most of this. There was an editorial. We don't have that, but the editor compared DJ Trump to a roach. This may actually be an older report here. It's on the 27th, 2 days ago. And we'll go to Senator Sanders. He was touring Baltimore. This is West Baltimore. Likened it to a third world country, no doubt about that. John Frizzy here is the person. And this would have been an older article. This was in 2015. Hoping to reach African American voters nationally, his bid for the presidency there. And this is in the neighborhood where Freddie Gray was murdered. The independent senator who described himself as a Democratic Socialist walked the streets of Sandtown and Winchester for about 20 minutes, joined by community leaders, etc. Handful of residents joined the and occasionally broke out in chants of Gray's name. The specular here. Anyway, the scene provided dramatic visuals of the economic inequality Bernie had been talking about, and this is where it needs to be put in its proper perspective, a new backdrop, which to argue for higher minimum wage and been arguing for the 15 tuition-free college and tougher federal regulations on the banking sector, who had redlined that West Baltimore to death. Anyone who took a walk that we took around this neighborhood would not think you were in a wealthy country. Later at the Freddie Gray Empowerment Center, in Bolton Hill, you would think that you were in a third world country. But Sanders' anti-poverty message was largely overshadowed by his reluctance to discuss the subject on which politicians, the news media, and the public have focused in recent days. Well, we can forget that. This is too far back here. Talking about ISIS. Well, ISIS is no longer in the news. Freddie Gray, of course, was murdered after suffering severe spinal cord injury at the hands of police. As he toured West Baltimore, the trial of the first police officers, of course they were all later acquitted, was occurred in downtown Baltimore. And he began the tour at the CBS, we talked about that earlier, at North and Pennsylvania Avenue, had burned during the rebellion. He walked to the corner of Pressbury and North Mott Street, where Freddie Gray was arrested, and looked at a large mirror of Freddie Gray. I'm impressed, said Michael Williams, a West Baltimore man who described himself as a Hillary fan. Well, we don't worry about that, but Martin O'Malley, who's also seeking out Martin O'Malley's history, visited West Baltimore after the rebellion, didn't get very much there. Sanders, who stayed, and they always talk about this, is 90% European, is reaching out to African Americans. And Sanders met with faith leaders, including Jamal Bryant of the Empowerment Temple in northwest Baltimore. It's very expensive to be poor, Sanders told the pastors. I didn't see a decent grocery store around here, so what are the moms feeding their children? Sanders also fielded some questions about interactions with policy and recidivism. In discussing the militarization, this is back to our whole point of this be safe situation around law and order. The militarization of police. Said his daughter was afraid of law enforcement. Had very good reason after she was freaking out. Brian stressed the meeting with leaders did not constitute an endorsement of the candidate. Melvin Doc Cheatham, a longtime civil rights leader, said that the event's organizers and other leaders made a mistake in not focusing more attention on neighborhoods west of Fullerton Avenue where Gray attended school and who the rebellion shuttered businesses. We're demanding that they consider all communities. Cheatham has said you need to come to West to understand what's happening. That indeed is there. And part of the glossing over of it, and if you start looking at the 50 continuous states and sustainable development, and a guns program, a national guns program will address the needs where we don't have situations like at the Garlic Festival out in Conroy, California. It's not just about West Baltimore. Until these assault guns are taken under out of the market and easy access to guns are addressed. You can't both have an open guns policy that is killing people literally by the hundreds and at the same time come up with some scheme where it's a law enforcement program telling people that they are going to be safe. Is the implication they're not going to be safe is what is happening there. All of this is right-wing propaganda. Don't believe it. We don't have any numbers today as far as polls. We'll have those later. Incidentally, we have just about completed our Identity Politics USA. We have most of it there. We'll get that out, and we'll also get out an open source report. This is Boston Red on the 29th of July, the Monday morning quarterback here. And we're in the Jerry Pippin Memorial broadcast booth, as we normally are. And we heard Harry call "Take Me Out to the Ballpark." Hopefully the ballparks will remain gun-free zones. Good day.